And we have arrived at the period between 1200 and 1300. Why are we only covering 100 years this time? Because the Mongols are emerging. The Mongols are such a legend that no empire has ever been as great as theirs. No empire has ever been as ruthless as they were. It is known that the Mongols killed 40 million people. It's not just Genghis Khan. I will also show you the family tree of Genghis Khan's sons and grandsons. They fought so ruthlessly that in the lands they passed through, I swear by National Geographic, they were building towers from skulls. And wherever they conquered land, they would destroy all agricultural opportunities there and did not want people to live. It is said that today, 1 in every 6 people in Central Asia is a descendant of Genghis Khan. Just think about how much intermingling has occurred. Now, where are we between the years 1200 and 1300? In the previous section, you may remember that we discussed the rise of the Seljuks, and the Mongols will intervene in such a way that we will connect the rise and fall of the Seljuks to the rise of the Ottomans. The Mongols deserve a section of their own. During this period, I will mention Europe, Central America, and so on. But the Mongols are advancing so rapidly from the east to the west, from Central Asia towards the west, that they are simultaneously pressuring Europe. The Europeans are going and pressuring the Islamic world in the territories they have acquired in Spain. In fact, they are completely rewriting the map of Europe. Let's begin with what Genghis Khan and his sons did. The world population is 360 million. In the year 1200, out of this 360 million population, 115 million are Chinese. Those Chinese will submit to Genghis Khan and his sons. The only empire that conquered Russia, a place no one even dreamed of capturing, especially during the winter. During this period, India had a population of 85 million, representing an empire that deserves to be discussed on its own. But for now, we will not go beyond what you see on the map. Perhaps we will dedicate time to it later. The rest of Asia had a population of 50 million. Genghis Khan eliminates 20 million of this 50 million. The same number is also eliminated in Europe. We said the world population is 360 million. 11% of this, which you may notice, is 40 million, being eliminated by Genghis Khan. To fully understand this figure, if we project it to today, the world population has increased 20 times. When you multiply 40 million by 20, it equates to someone establishing an empire and erasing approximately 800 million to 1 billion people from history. At the time when Genghis Khan ended the lives of this 40 million population, Baghdad, Damascus, and Paris had a population of 100,000. Constantinople, that is, Istanbul, which I will refer to as Istanbul from time to time, has a population of 200,000. Therefore, 40 million is a significant number. In 1200, Pope IV declared the Fourth Crusade. The purpose of the Fourth Crusade was to unite the Christian world. The Eastern Roman Church, which we refer to as Byzantium, particularly the part we call Istanbul, is featured in the very popular television series Rise of Autumn, where you can watch how Fatih conquered Istanbul. We are looking at a later time, specifically 203 years later. We are looking 200 years ahead. The Eastern Roman Church and the Pope are actually somewhat in contradiction, but the Pope wants to unite the Christian world in order to achieve another victory against Islam. And he is managing the Fourth Crusade. They gather in Venice in 1202 and receive the cross from the Pope. In 1204, they arrive in Istanbul, that is Constantinople, and amidst Christian hatred, Istanbul is being plundered. Constantinople is being looted. They are placing a prostitute on the emperor's throne in Hagia Sophia. Just think about how much they hate. During this period, Istanbul experiences its greatest plunder in history. Imagine that instead of the emperor, or rather the patriarch, there is a prostitute on the throne of a clergyman. This is the first time in the history of Istanbul that it is captured. We actually consider the first capture of Constantinople, Istanbul, as the first conquest of the Islamic world, but unfortunately, this date is not well known because they were attacked unexpectedly. The Eastern Roman Empire, also known as the Byzantines, is now changing its name to the Eastern Latin Empire. During this time, the Byzantine Empire is retreating towards Nicaea. They are taking refuge in Nicaea. Half of the city is taken by the Venetians, as the Venetians are a very powerful military force among the Italians. In fact, they are supporting the naval side of this crusade. While the Venetians are taking control of places under Byzantine or Eastern Roman control, they are also seizing many islands in the Mediterranean and the Aegean. We know Genghis Khan as Temujin during this period. Genghis Khan had not yet received the title of Khan of the seas and oceans. This term is often confused with Genghis Khan, as many people mix it up. Later on, they refer to him as an emperor. However, the correct translation is Chinggis Khan, which means the lord of these people, or the owner of these people. At the time of Genghis Khan's birth, the Mongols were very tribal, disorganized, and were fighting among themselves. Genghis Khan's first goal was to unite the Mongols to launch a campaign against China, because he knows that there is a lot of treasure in the direction of Beijing. He knows that the Chinese live in great prosperity. And he says that the greatest exports to the world, such as silk and paper, are made by the Chinese. If I capture the Chinese, I can easily expand my country. This is where he also conceives the idea of a Great Mongolia. There is an event where there is a very large misconception. There is a false belief that the Great Wall of China was built against the Mongols, specifically against Genghis Khan. Another misconception is that the Great Wall is the only man-made structure visible from space. Both are incorrect. The Great Wall of China is not visible from space, rest assured. Secondly, the construction of the Great Wall began before Christ, and for 1500 years, the Great Wall was developed step by step. So yes, the Great Wall is being expanded against the attacks of Genghis Khan, but the Great Wall was already there long before. Genghis Khan was born in 1162 in Mongolia. He died in 1227 in northern China. He achieves very vast conquests in this lifetime, but he is a madman. He is so crazy that he wants everyone to be killed at his own funeral, which is why the location of his grave is still unknown today. Let me tell you something to help us better understand the Mongols. The Mongols were committing such ruthless and brutal massacres that many cities surrendered as soon as they heard of their arrival. In other words, their reputation preceded them. They had very successful engineering and communication systems. In terms of communication, they paid particular attention to sending messages using signals, such as lighting fires, which they learned from the Chinese. Their horses were already used to carry messages. On the other hand, they possessed ruthless war technology. I mentioned that Genghis Khan's actions led to the deaths of 40 million people in 1 or 2 generations, and now I say that a similarly deadly black plague will spread across the world. The reason is that I can't quite remember if it was Genghis Khan's grandson or cousin. I will check. During one of his campaigns, he was very close to entering Europe and used a catapult to throw his soldiers who had died from the plague into the city. This also spread the plague to Europe from ports like Venice. As you can understand, there has not been an empire as great as that of Genghis Khan and the Mongols in the world. The Mongols are rapidly expanding through conquest. They cannot hold their ground because no one supports them. Why is it that the Ottoman Empire was able to stand for around 600 years? Because he is busy recruiting wherever he goes. Now, when we look at the Ayyubids, we see that the soldiers of Saladin Ayyubi also enslave the people in the lands they pass through, such as the Turks, and incorporate them into their own ranks, their army. This will lead to rebellions in the days to come. In Genghis Khan's army, there was no idea of taking many soldiers, or capturing hostages, or having them be loyal to me or love me. They simply slaughtered and moved on. The Ottomans also practiced devshirme. They even converted children taken from Christians at a younger age into janissaries, who were the backbone of the army. But you know that the janissaries, as well as the foreign brides, and foreign viziers and administrators we took in, played a significant role in the decline of the Ottoman Empire. But this was something that always existed in the world during that time. In other words, as you expand, you inevitably have to incorporate someone from the opposing religion, from the enemy country, into your lineage. The Mongols are not a community that engages in farming like this. They are not a people who would say, let's raise large animals and practice shepherding in their empire. What the Mongols did was primarily looting and attacking. There was one thing that Genghis Khan absolutely did not forgive: betrayal. The men of Kamoka betrayed Kamoka and surrendered him to Genghis Khan. He is executing Kamuka's men. He says you will not betray him. For this reason, he has a high level of loyalty, because people do not even think about betraying him. It is known that Genghis Khan showed no mercy to either Islam or the Turks during his period of expansion. What he first eliminated and presented as an achievement to gain a title was the destruction of the Tatars. Of course, it is not eradicating the root, but it is trying to eliminate the neighboring Tatars as soon as possible and unite the Mongols to gain a title. He challenges his own Khan, Tughril Bey, and thus takes control of the Mongols. Genghis Khan first conquers Central Asia and northern China. Thus, they are encroaching on the Karakhanid Empire and becoming neighbors. At this time, Europe does not care at all about Genghis Khan. They say that the Mongols and such are of no concern to them. They are experiencing more of a religious issue among themselves. The Pope and others are constantly fighting over who will govern the Christian world. Empires are also fighting with religion in the same way, because, as I mentioned in the previous video, the Pope has begun to see himself as a power above the emperors. The ability to declare the crusade was indeed made possible by this. Especially during this period, France will be very closely aligned with the Pope. Germany and Byzantium, after a while, say they are the Pope's place. King John of England forms an alliance with King Otto IV of Germany, just as the Mongols are doing something over there. Let's attack those French, they had taken my lands. Let's take back these Anglo-Saxon lands. In this Vinnic War, the French are defeating them. Therefore, King John is measuring his own stature. This annoys the Pope, who then excommunicates him. One of the main reasons why England could not grow earlier and dominate the world is this King John. Amidst the frenzy of, let's hit John, King John, the barons and nobles in England are rising up. They say, how can a king be like this? How incompetent you are. And meanwhile, he starts making laws on his own. This doesn't sit well with the people of England either. A civil war breaks out. The French are also pouring gasoline on the fire, saying they will help bring down the king. He is also forced to sign the first constitutional document known as the Magna Carta, which regulates the king's laws, the Great Charter, Magna Carta. The Magna Carta consists of 63 clauses, and today 3 of them are still in effect in England. Just think about it. Therefore, the first law that could regulate a king's powers was the Magna Carta. While King John was signing this Magna Carta like a transfer agreement, Genghis Khan was on the other side capturing Beijing. King John cannot hold out for long. After a while, the Magna Carta is violated again. He makes up laws for himself. He says things like, you cannot come against the king. I have rights too, and I am cancelling this. In 1216, England is partially invaded with the support of the French. King John is filling his treasury with all the gold he can find, stealing whatever he can from the state treasury. He tries to escape in a cart, but he sinks everything in the swamp. Therefore, if we look at this period, England is not very stable. It cannot stir the world. Italy is experiencing problems within itself. This is because the papacy did not engage in conflicts with Italy. Germany does not want to get involved with everyone. Most people hate the Byzantines because the Venetians have once taken over Byzantium. They are working on it and continue to do so. The Orthodox and Catholic churches have issues among themselves. France has problems like England, while Germany is at peace, but it is uncertain what will happen beyond tomorrow. There is chaos throughout Europe. The Pope, in the meantime, says that he should gather them together. He declares the Fifth Crusade. A somewhat decent army is formed. They go all the way to Egypt for the Fifth Crusade. However, there is one thing that the Crusaders did not account for. It is the flooding season of the Nile River. When they carry Niniya, they come back slowly. Of course, they cannot explain this to Europe like that. We returned before reaching Cairo. We could not calculate how much Niniya would carry. They say that, but they are losing a lot of prestige. The Pope declares the Sixth Crusade, saying, attack my lions. There is a deficiency here as well. The Germans, the Emperor of Germany says that if I make peace with the Muslims and do not participate in the Crusades, I will be better off. After all, we keep going and returning empty-handed. And in 1229, in exchange for some areas around Jerusalem being handed over to the Christians, he says, I do not interfere with the Muslims. Go and fight for yourselves. The Sixth Crusade also breaks out. As all this is happening, the Pope loses prestige and sends people in vain, labeling them as heretics, meaning those who do not believe in the Pope, or as atheists. However, these individuals accept Christianity and God in different ways. Some do not believe at all. These heretics find stronger cards in their own hands. They say, look, the Pope sends you, and you keep coming back empty-handed, wandering around in your own country. As a result, disbelief against Christians is also increasing. After all, following the Sixth Crusade, the Pope realizes that he cannot do anything against Islam. He is establishing the English and trying to eliminate many people he calls heretics by hanging and beheading them. He is trying to exert pressure on both Christians and non-Christians to demonstrate power. In 1227, a rebellion breaks out in China. Genghis Khan dies while trying to suppress it. If you think that Genghis Khan's death would slow down the Mongols, you are mistaken. Genghis Khan has 4 sons. In fact, he has many sons. But the 4 sons that are important to us are those he appointed as his heirs. Genghis Khan's legacy is taken by his eldest son, Juchi, who acquires the Kipchak steppe extending towards the Russian principalities. Chagatai takes the territories of Samarkand, Mavere, the Transoxiana region, and present-day Turkestan. His youngest son, Tolui, focuses on the steppes, which are the ancestral lands of Genghis Khan. His 3rd son, Ogedei, is chosen as the greatest ruler and takes his father's place. He is more ambitious than his father. He is attacking both the east and the west. Now, there is something about the Mongols. Despite being divided into 4, Ogedei is referred to by many names. I apologize, but those names have been carried very differently to the present day. They are listening to Ogedei's orders. In fact, I will explain it to you shortly. If someone dies in any way, for example, if the emperor dies, Genghis Khan calls everyone back to the capital, and they wait for the voting or the election, whatever it may be, to determine how the next leader will be chosen and what decisions will be made. They are not occupying places according to their own whims. Ogedei establishes this strategy, but the actual expansion towards the west is carried out by his eldest son, Kuku, who is the grandson of Genghis Khan, Batu. The Batuan is expanding towards Europe so rapidly that it is truly making a name for itself along the way. In some books, the concept of the Golden Horde is incorrectly referred to as the Golden Order. We will call this the Kipchak dynasty. The Kipchak Khanate is being established. In 1237, Batu Khan creates a legend. The fleet crosses the rivers and enters deep into Russia during winter. The Russian principalities are being captured one by one. It strikes Russia so quickly that before anyone in Europe realizes what is happening, it has already taken the desired territories in Russia, then it turns back and heads to Central Europe. It burns everything in its path as it moves forward. For the first time, Eurasia, Europe, and Asia are uniting in Istanbul. The empire that forms the concept of Eurasia is the Mongols, thanks to Batu Khan. A route for trade between Europe and Asia can now be established. Interestingly, although these terrible Mongols have taken over these lands, a system known as Mongol peace is in effect in their territories. He says that the Mongols are not so foolish. There needs to be trade for us to hold on to these lands, because there are things to be sold and acquired in Europe as well as in China, and they form the lifeblood of the Silk Road. No one even dares to loot anything in their own lands. In 1241, the Teutonic Knights are in Poland. These Teutonic Knights are very famous. They believe they can definitely stop the Mongols. In 3 days, they scatter them to pieces. Without stopping, Batu Khan captures Hungary 3 days later. Within a year, in 1242, he reaches the gates of Vienna. As you know, there is a problem at the gates of Vienna. Unfortunately, the law has also come to a standstill at the gates of Vienna. Our ancestors, the Ottomans, also approached the gates of Vienna, but eventually turned back. Batu Khan is at the gates of Vienna. The great Khan, who is the son of Genghis Khan and succeeded him, Ogedei, is dying. When he died, he gathered the entire army and returned to the capital, as the Mongols pressed on. The Europeans were naturally pushed westward. As they became increasingly pressed towards the west, they began to free themselves from the Muslims in Seville and the Muslims in Spain after a while. Naturally, one of the reasons for the decline of Islam in the European continent is the Mongols. In this chaos, the Pope says, "Shall we launch a crusade or not, brave men?" Only the King of France says, "I will do it, just give me the cross." Now, let me show you how I am taking over Egypt. He says he will cleanse the promised lands, Jerusalem and Mundus. He takes the cross of the 9th century and is captured in Egypt in 1244. As his army disbanded, his mother had to pay a fortune in ransom to get her son back. The crusade has lost all its significance now. The 8th one is being organized, but no one believes in the crusades anymore. As you know, during this period, the Ayyubids were strong, as I mentioned in the previous video. Now, regarding the Ayyubids, I need to correct the misinformation I provided at the beginning of the video. He is building the backbone of his armies with slaves obtained from the Mamluks of Egypt and the Turkish Caucasian tribes. Over time, these slaves, after gaining strength in the army, revolt, and the Ayyubids disband. The Mamluk Sultanate emerges in its place. They establish the Mamluk dynasties by overthrowing the last Ayyubid Sultan, Turan. During these years, if you ask what is happening on the American continent, the Aztecs are emerging in the lands towards Mexico. The Aztecs, like the Incas and Mayans, were very artistic. They make excellent use of gold, silver, and other materials. They create hand tools and are constantly developing new things. But the Aztecs are also fading away in some way. In 1251, Menguhan ascends to the throne. Grandson of Genghis Khan, his brothers Kublai and Hulagu are very important figures. They are advancing both on China and on the Seljuk state. Hulagu Khan is fighting against the Seljuk state between 1251 and 1255. In the video from 1256, it is mentioned that they conquer the Alamut castle. By killing everyone present, Alamut was a very renowned fortress. He is bringing an end to the sect, God forbid. In 1258, Hulagu Khan, that is, the Mongol, captures Baghdad at the height of his advance. He kills more than 100,000 Muslims and executes the last, Abbasid Caliph. They are executing people in the battlefield, especially during the war. They are also waiting for the war to end, to prevent the people from regrouping. In Baghdad, they plunder all agricultural land and systems, including irrigation channels and waterways. In 1259, as they were advancing towards the Syrian frontiers, news arrived of the great Khan's death, and the army returned to the capital, Karakum. This is also the greatest misfortune of the Mongols, because the rise of the Mongols turns here. Until today, no one has dared to resist, oppose, or attack the Mongols. When the Mongols arrived, they burned and destroyed everything in their path. As soon as they captured the lands of Syria and withdrew, the Mamluk army annihilated the remaining Mongol garrison in Syria. Those who see this are also destroying and eliminating the Mongol army in Palestine. It is evident that the Mongols can be killed, eradicated, and defeated. Hulagu Khan notices this, but there are both throne wars and a civil war leading to chaos. He cannot deal with the reputation of the Mongols in the West at all. Iran, Iraq, and a large part of present-day Armenia, Georgia, Azerbaijan, and Anatolia are rising against the Mongols, freeing themselves, and the Ilkhanate state emerges. During this time, Kublai Khan is conquering Korea and China, falling into incredible wealth due to his conquest of China. He is known to have built a palace for himself and established a special army of over 10,000 men for his protection. Trouble is eyeing Japan. The Mongols were never good at sea. They were always strong on land. In 1268, they set their sights on Japan. First, he equips a ship and establishes a fleet, sending it out. They go to war with Japan, but the Japanese resist, and thanks to a typhoon, the armies and fleets sink. Kublai Khan gets angry and sends a large fleet with 150,000 soldiers. The Japanese, while refusing to submit and saying they would not surrender, were delayed. As a greater storm, a typhoon, emerged and sank these armies, allowing them to escape from the Mongols. At that time, this was referred to as kamikaze. So, divine wind. Later, we will see this when they sacrifice their planes with a divine wind while fighting against America in suicide attacks. Kamikaze is like that too. The Byzantines had fled to Nicaea, if you remember. They see that the Mongols are disappearing. The Abbasids also withdrew. The Pope was preoccupied with his own issues, and the Venetians had pulled back their army and navy to Italy. With Europe in turmoil, they aimed to capture Istanbul as soon as possible, and the Byzantines, or Eastern Romans, regained control of Istanbul, which remained in their hands until 1453, when it fell to Fatih Sultan Mehmet. And while all this was happening in 1258, something was still stirring in Anatolia with Osman Bey. Now, Osman Bey, also known as Ataman Bey or Atman Bey, is a figure whose name is much debated and from whom the name of the Ottoman Empire is derived. It is believed that the nomadic Turkmen tribes migrated to Anatolia, establishing the roots of the Turks, and that Osman Bey emerged from among them to found the Ottoman Empire. During this period, the Seljuks fragmented, leading to the Seljuk Rum state, dividing into small principalities within Anatolia. The Byzantines were already weakened, while fighting against both the Venetians and the Latins, as well as the Seljuks. Therefore, the rise of the Ottomans in Anatolia is not of much concern to the Byzantines. In the next video, we will begin discussing the Ottomans. I hope you are now following the videos in a more enjoyable and beautiful way. We are approaching the present day. See you in the next video about the rise of the Ottoman Empire.